All right, hi everyone. I'm Gabriel Metcalf, the CEO of the Committee for Sydney, and I hope you are doing okay. I hope you are managing through this. We are in a moment when we seem to be part of history, and not in a good way. Not in a good way, but we are trying to adapt the way I know all of you are. For those of you who want a distraction by thinking about the kinds of things we normally think about, how to make Sydney better, how cities can learn from one another, all of the things that we love to talk about normally, we have a solution for you. We are moving the Committee for Sydney's programming online, and this is our very first online event. So we're going to see how this goes. We are here to talk about the road to Vision Zero, meaning zero pedestrian fatalities. A global movement that is changing the way people think about transport, the way streets are designed. We have come to take it for granted that every year so many people are killed while walking or riding bicycles, but in fact it does not have to be that way. In a minute, I'll be bringing our amazing guest speaker, Leah Shahum, up to walk you through the presentation. Let me just do a couple of thank yous and tell you how this is going to work. So first of all, I want to thank Uber. Uber was signed up to be the sponsor of this event because Uber is the mobility event series partner for the Committee for Sydney. Originally this was going to be in Uber's offices, but we're shifting like we have to. And look, this was a great fit for Uber because they're part of the Road to Zero coalition. And in Australia, they continue to announce new initiatives like ensuring that all vehicles on the platform have a 5-star NCAP rating. So clearly this topic is very relevant. I also really want to thank the ICC. The ICC is one of the core strategic partners for the Committee for Sydney. The ICC connects Sydney to the world. And the ICC is helping us with our broadcasting of our now online event series. So they have been incredibly important to the committee, and they will be in the future. So thank you to the ICC. All right, Leah Shahum is the founder and director of the Vision Zero Network, bringing 2 decades of proven success, championing movements to advance safe, healthy, active transportation. She serves on the steering group of the National Road to Zero Coalition, as well as the advisory board of the Collaborative Sciences Center for Road Safety at the University of North Carolina. Leah previously was the longtime head of the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition. She had a huge impact on San Francisco, I can personally attest to. So we are thrilled that we got her in before global travel shut down. We were hoping to get her out before that becomes too hard to do. So we're very grateful she's here. With that, let me bring up to the podium Leah Shahum.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thanks so much to the Committee for Sydney. Thanks also to all the sponsors and everyone who's making this possible. Let me say, there's nowhere I'd rather be right now. I'm thrilled to be in your beautiful city of Sydney. I've been getting around a lot, seeing a lot, and if I do end up getting stuck for a while, this is a great place to be stuck. So thanks so much for the opportunity to be here. Again, my name is Leah Shahum, and I run the nonprofit called the Vision Zero Network. I'm based in San Francisco, California, as Gabriel mentioned, but our work as a nonprofit is across the US. So our work is really advancing the goal of Vision Zero, which is the goal of zero traffic deaths, and severe injuries. I think it's important to emphasize traffic deaths or severe injuries among all road users. So people walking, biking, driving, riding transit, riding scooters, everyone. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the US. I'll share that we work mostly at the local level across the country because that's where we're seeing the most energy and momentum and political will. Though we do have some dealings also at state and national level, but you'll see a lot of local examples here that I hope Sydney can relate to. And we'll get started. I probably do not need to share this number, as many of you probably know it. If you're interested, you're on this webinar right now, you probably know we have a huge public health crisis in this world of 1.24 million traffic deaths each year. I really was sad to learn recently that that's the #1 cause of death among people aged 15 to 29 years old. So really, really amazing. And I pause and say, I think we do need to be thinking this more as a public health crisis with that many deaths, far more injuries, and of course impacts from environmental issues and just general degradation, not being able to get to jobs, et cetera. There's far more impact. But the good news here is that we do have a vaccine for this problem, and we're going to talk about that today. So again, you might be wondering, why in the world is someone from the United States here talking to us in Australia about road safety? I'll be the first to admit, in the US, we do not have a great track record on road safety. I hope that'll actually be helpful to you, though, to see what we're doing. And to put it in perspective, in the US, we have 12 traffic deaths per 100,000 residents. Whereas here, as I understand in Australia, you're closer to 5, a little over 5 traffic deaths per 100,000. So good on you. You're definitely doing better than the US. But obviously, that number is not where we want it to be. That is, obviously, any death is too many. So looking at places like, and I'm going to talk a little bit, though not a lot, about places like Sweden and the UK, we know it's possible in a busy, successful, modern community, city and country. So the country of Sweden, which is really the founder and birthplace of Vision Zero, they're at 2.5 traffic deaths per 100,000, so half of what Australia is. And the UK at 2.8 traffic deaths per 100,000. So just to put that in perspective, it's not about necessarily size and level of activity. It really is about looking at those rates. We know we can do better. And I'll be the first to say it's not because people in Sweden or the UK or these places, care about their loved ones more. It's not because their engineers are smarter. It's not because their bodies are any stronger when there is a crash. It really is about the approach they've been taking to the ongoing problem of road safety. So I'm really going to focus in on what are they doing differently in these places and what can we learn from that around Vision Zero. And I also want to do one other caveat. A lot of times I know in the US we say, oh, but that's Sweden, oh, that's the UK, that's Europe, et cetera. There are, first, a lot of examples from other places, such as South American places, South American cities that are probably a little more similar to ours. But also the fact that places like Sweden and the UK, they were at the rates we were at. They literally 40 years ago, they were at the same traffic death rates that the Australia and US were. And they have significantly lowered those traffic death rates through the Vision Zero approach. So it's not through a lower population or less mobility, it's about what they're doing on the ground. So with that, I want to jump right into it. Here's a little bit about what we're doing in the US to start. You can see there are about 40 dots on this map. These are all the local communities, the cities that have committed to Vision Zero in the US. And this has all come about just in the last 5.5 years. So it's really quite a new phenomenon, I'd say movement in the US. We're really early stages, so we're learning a lot, I'll be the first to say. But it's been really exciting to see this growth. If you'd asked me 6 or 7 years ago, did I think any US community, any mayor or police chief or transportation director of a department, did I think they would stand up and say, yes, we can get to 0 traffic deaths? I would have said, you're crazy. It's a great idea. I love it. They're doing it in Sweden. But I don't think the US is going to do that, sadly. I'm really happy to prove myself wrong. Again, we're having more than 40 places where they are making these commitments. Now, we're far from there, I'll be the first to admit, but they are acknowledging the problem and committing to a different way to go. So what does that really mean? This is just a bit of overview, but this is kind of what I'm going to run through today, or what are the differences between the traditional approach to road safety and the Vision Zero approach. And let me say, the Vision Zero approach is really based on what's called a safe systems approach, so I'll kind of use that interchangeably. But Number one, the difference between accepting these traffic deaths and severe injuries as inevitable, as some awful, factor of modern society. That's generally how we've been thinking of it. Maybe not consciously, but we have been. Oh, in a modern society, in a thriving society, we have a certain number of traffic deaths. In fact, no. These traffic deaths are preventable. We know what to do. It's really about organizing the political will and energy to do it. Secondly, this is really important. A lot of the work in the past has been around focusing on human behavior. And that is very important. We want individuals, whether they're driving, biking, walking, we want them to be safe, right? So let's teach kids how to cross the street safely, sure. Let's teach people how to drive safely, of course. Keep that up. But we are never going to make humans perfect in any issue, certainly not in how they get around. So what Vision Zero does is it acknowledges that humans are fallible. It integrates that failing into the work, and I'll give some examples of that. So it's a really, really different approach than how we've been doing it in the past. I'm going to skip down a little bit now and then talk about individual responsibility and systems approach. Individually, again, back to that point of, hey, we need to teach people how to drive, walk, and bike safely. Yes, let's keep doing that. That's important. But we're not going to get there just through individual change. We're just not going to do it because, again, that fallibility issue. So how are we looking at the systems that are in place? How are we looking at the roadway environment and the policies, the speeds we set, et cetera? These, what we call upstream approaches, are really what are going to make the difference in people's behavior. So I'm going to give some examples of that from different places around the country, around the world, really. So just to start, thinking about traffic deaths as preventable, here's a really basic one. I kind of like to start with this because it, I think, helps just frame the idea. We refer to this as traffic accidents. I know I have forever. I know the media does. Most people call them traffic accidents. It gives this sense that we have no agency, as if these are truly freak incidents that we have no idea could be happening. A meteor crashing into something, and who could have seen it coming, right? That is not what these are. And we'll talk about, these are largely predictable and largely preventable, mostly preventable incidents. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So even thinking about your language, so whether you're in the profession or everyday person, really think about how you're talking about this. And sure, words are words. It doesn't change the world, but it does help us start to think about having agency over these issues. So really thinking about what can we do. So the idea of taking a systems approach, this is just a quick example. This is something that the public health world, the more traditional, let's say, public health world, has been doing a great deal. And I think, we're right in the midst of that with the coronavirus issue of, should we be encouraging individual knowledge and skills and individual education and behavior? Yes, absolutely. That is critical. And we need to keep doing that. So in the road safety world, again, you're educating kids and adults, et cetera. Keep doing that. But we really want to be focusing upstream. What are the policies, the legislation, the organizational practices that have the greatest impact on the environment? So again, in the road safety world, how are we designing our streets? How are we setting our speeds? What are we doing literally in the physical environment that makes the most difference? So it's a really different way of thinking about the road safety. And we've borrowed this from the Swedes. What this really is showing is there's a shared responsibility between the road users. So you see the little car there. So imagine, whether you're driving, biking, walking, there's the road users. Yes, we want them to be responsible. But they're sometimes going to make mistakes, whether that's bad decisions or truly just, sun in your eyes while you're driving. Bad things can happen, right? So at that point, we really want to look at the system designers. We think about these as the planners, the engineers, but also the decision makers, politicians, bureaucrats in charge of agencies. We want to go back to those system designers and policymakers and say, what can we do to the environment so that when that inevitable crash happens, it's not fatal and it's not severe? So the idea is crashes will happen, but if people can walk away with a broken ankle or a fender bender versus the most severe death and severe fatalities, then that is progress, and that is our ethical responsibility. Vision Zero is about saying, hey, everyone deserves safe mobility no matter how they get around, and it really is an ethical issue, so it's about choices. So how do we do that? A lot of it is being data-driven. That's not a new concept either. Let me pause and say, a lot of these are not new concepts. I think it's really about bringing them to the fore and really thinking about how is our decision-making and prioritizing happening. So data helps us make decisions, right? So here I pulled this example from my city of San Francisco. What we see is that 70% of, this is actually serious injury crashes, 70% of serious injury crashes are happening on just 12% of our streets. I can cite the same statistics, not exactly same, I can cite similar statistics for Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. City after city after city that we're working with in the US has a disproportionate number of problems with traffic safety on a relatively small number of streets. That's unfortunate in some ways, but it's also power, right? This information is power. So what do we do with that? Well, let me go back. What do we do with it? It really means that we know where to put our scarce resources. Because let's be honest, no community is going to have endless money or staff time. We always have to make decisions and priorities with our budgets and our time. So we really need to be focusing more and as much as possible on these problem areas, even though, and probably because they are trickier streets, right? We've figured out the easier things, probably. We've done the low-hanging fruit. So how are we doing the tougher stuff? And we'll talk about some of that. I'll share I've been really encouraged in my city of San Francisco. I've seen a real shift in the way the city's thinking about it politically. For example, we have 11 city council districts. Probably like councils for you, we have 11 different chunks of the city, each with their own council member. And in the old days, traffic safety budgets were divvied up by 1/11th, and that's how things are often done, right? Everybody gets their equal share, so to speak. But through our work with Vision Zero, even in the first year or two, when we mapped out the problems, we created what's called a high injury network, and we really looked at where the most severe problems were happening. And we saw that they were happening, and this may not surprise people, they were happening in particular in low-income neighborhoods, communities of color, communities with high number of seniors and children, also high numbers of people walking and biking. So thinking about these more vulnerable communities, they're not spread evenly over the city. We had 2 districts in particular in San Francisco that were really, really the worst for traffic safety issues. They also had more of these vulnerable populations. So I'm really proud to say that in San Francisco, thanks to a lot of work with our city council members and a lot of advocacy and I think strong leadership also from our mayor at the time, what we saw is we saw that road safety budget shift so that more funds were going to the 2 neighborhoods that needed them most, understanding that it was really about an equitable approach versus just everyone gets their quote-unquote fair piece of the pie. So just an example of how it's really turning into kind of a practical use of data and how we get things decided. So what does this all mean on the ground? And I really want to jump to kind of how it works. I think, so far sharing the principles of Vision Zero, probably everyone would agree, right? Who doesn't agree with the goal of 0 traffic deaths? Hopefully everybody, but what does it really mean? And here's where we get to the part where I think we're starting, to veer even more from the traditional, or maybe not veer from, but build on or evolve from the traditional traffic safety approach. People may be familiar with the E's, the way we call them, of education, enforcement, engineering, evaluation, emergency medical services. In the US, we've really worked with all these E's. And let me be the first to say, all of the E's are very important. I'll throw in some additional E's of equity and engagement, thinking about community engagement and equity like I just spoke of. But really thinking about how do we make sure that all the E's do get attention. But to be honest, that not all of these E's are created equal. Frankly, we've been putting a lot more emphasis in our traditional approach on the education and enforcement sides. And while they're still important, they've frankly been taking up more of the space and energy than we need. So thinking about a new model, again, all of these E's fit in, but we're really thinking about if our goal is safe travel for all, how are we thinking about how to get there? And you'll see the categories here of safe streets, safe speeds, safe vehicles, and safe people. There's engineering within all of these. There's education within all of these. There's enforcement within most of these, et cetera. So you see how the E's still fit in. But some of these really need to be lifted up. And I'm going to focus today on the safe streets and safe speeds examples because they are most important and they are most near term what we can influence for change. So really thinking about how we design our streets and how we set and manage our speeds are the most important things we can do. Let me say we're excited as automated vehicles someday come online. That's great, but they're still going to be working in our built environment. So they're still going to be working with the policies we set. So we really need to be thinking about what does that look like now, so that we can be saving lives sooner, but also be preparing for the future. I want to give some examples. So starting with safe streets and street design, I really, really like this example of Queens Boulevard in New York City. So Queens is a big borough of New York City. It's actually a little bit more suburban style than, say, a Manhattan. Manhattan's very dense, et cetera, but Queens is a little bit more typical, say, of our US communities. Queens Boulevard was a giant, and it still is, a giant road. You can see the before picture there. I think it was 10 lanes wide, and for about a decade, it was known, very well known, as the Boulevard of Death. People in the neighborhood called it that, the media called it that, people at the transportation department and city council literally called it the Boulevard of Death because of the numbers. And you can see 300 plus crashes a year, and it was one of the most unsafe streets in the city. Yet they were not making traction on changes. The types of changes that they wanted to make, there was a lot of community pushback. There wasn't the political will to do it. After Vision Zero, and let me give a shout out. I want to say New York City is the first US city to commit to Vision Zero, and they've had really strong success. I'll talk more about that, but they really were the leader and early adopter for us. But the biggest way that they've done that is about changing their streets, like here, and also lowering speeds and managing speed. So they went into Queens Boulevard after Vision Zero got rolling, and they really had a much greater emphasis on safety. Before, it was about livability, walking and biking, and these are all important things, right? We want those things, but they really, really emphasized the safety piece because of the dramatic fatality and injury toll there. And they dramatically changed the streets. And hopefully you can see on the after image, what they did is they reduced the number of travel lanes, added a buffered bike lane. It's tough to see, but there are actually physical posts in between the green bike lane there and the car travel lane. So there is some physical protection there. And very much widened the pedestrian space. What's interesting, you can see the regular sidewalk there, kind of in the middle where the trees are planted. And actually, looks like trees were planted, I forgot that. But they actually painted kind of a sand color, the street there. So it's, I think, an interesting way to do something much cheaper, too. Rather than widening that sidewalk, which hopefully they'll do one day when they have the funds, they actually painted the street this kind of sand color so that it extended the sidewalk and have a stripe there, so that the bikes are on the green area, the people walking are on the sidewalk in the sand-colored area. They also extended walking times for pedestrians significantly, and they made the crossings shorter with fewer travel lanes. They also managed speed or lowered the speed limits here. So you can see the significant decrease of injuries here, most importantly, which is really impressive. Let me just pause on New York. They've been going now for 5 years with Vision Zero. Their traffic death rate in the first 4 years for which they have data, they've lowered traffic deaths in New York City by 30%. So really significant. And that's at a time when the US numbers have been going up. So they've really been bucking the trend, and it's very impressive. Let me pause and say, no other US city has been seeing that amount of success yet. So I do want to say, it's not common yet, but with them being an early adopter, and I'd say probably the city that's really investing the most politically and resource-wise and change-wise, really hewing to the safe systems approach most, it's very encouraging for the rest of us. Here's another example of what New York is doing. I really love thinking about safe systems really is about being proactive and predictive versus just reactive. There's a time and place to be reactive, and that's probably where we're all going to start. When you look at your map, like I said, you create this map and look at, okay, where are severe injuries and fatalities happening? You've got some hot spots in places, right? You absolutely should address those hot spots, make those a priority because people are dying there. That's still a reactive approach, right? We don't want to wait until people are dying to fix our streets. Maybe we start there, but that's not the full agenda, obviously. We want to get ahead of it and prevent these things. So in New York City's analysis, and again, I think they're ahead of the curve here, they analyzed the entire city, looked at their hotspots, but then looked at the trends of hotspots. Where are we seeing systematic problems? One of the examples is a left turn. So a vehicle here you can see is turning left across so many lanes of traffic and across a pedestrian zone. By the way, there's a report online. Check out either our website or New York City DOT's Department of Transportation website. There's much more detail. But what they found is that there's a predominant problem of this movement for cars crossing the pedestrian space. So instead of going out and saying, okay, well, let's go fix the 6 locations where that has resulted in death, They went out and said, you know what? This is likely to be a problem over and over and over again. Let's not wait for it. So over 2 years, and granted it's going to take some time, but over 2 years, they are addressing more than 100 locations that have this configuration. So they know it's a troublesome configuration. And they're honest that, hey, it's going to take different solutions. Sometimes it'll be, you can see here, what they did was paint out, extend out, and put yellow bollards so that the turning movement for the vehicle turning left is wider, and they're forced to slow down and make a wider movement, and they have more visibility with the pedestrians, et cetera. They're doing that in some places. In some places, they found that's not enough. We're actually going to ban the left turn. Cars cannot turn left here. In some places, it's as simple as adding time onto the pedestrian walk cycle. So there's all sorts of course, people way smarter than me know how to do the engineering solutions. But a really great example of if we want to get ahead of this problem and frankly use our scarce resources wisely, we need to be proactive and predictive about that. And that's something we've been learning from folks, again, in Sweden and the Netherlands. I'm going to highlight one more US example. The city of Seattle, Washington is also another Vision Zero leader. They've been going for about 4.5 years now, so an early adopter. And they're really focusing on street design and speed management. Again, the two most important things to be doing. Rainier Avenue, you can see here on the left, a big, wide street, carried a lot of traffic. They also had a good amount of transit here. And on average, you were seeing a crash per day, a high number of traffic deaths. Partly what got the attention here, frankly, is that there were, sadly, a high-profile 2 kids were killed a couple years ago while walking, and it really mobilized the community to fight for change. So again, this was an example where they had years of data showing a problem, but they didn't, frankly, have the community and public will to change it. So sadly, with this very high-profile tragedy with the kids dying, and with their Vision Zero movement coming forward, they did dramatically change the street. So you'll see they did what's called a road diet or street reduction, lane reduction, where they went from 2 lanes, 2 travel lanes in each direction to 1 in each direction with a middle turn lane. They actually created a bus-only or transit-only lane for parts of the street. And you'll see, and they lowered speeds. I should mention they lowered the traffic speeds. So you'll see significant reductions in crashes, injuries, and really importantly, people are moving more slowly and safely on the street by car, which is key. Just to highlight, this is not, we probably know a lot of European examples, sharing a few US new examples, but really exciting to see places in South America, Central America, Mexico City, Bogota, Colombia are both relatively new Vision Zero cities. And I point to Bogota because it's such a big, dense, and busy city. They've had dramatic improvements, though. They've been working on street redesigns, they've lowered speed limits, and they've added safety cameras or speed cameras, as I believe you have. And in just their first year of Vision Zero, Bogota's seen an 8% decrease in traffic deaths. So pretty impressive for an early piece. And I'll switch real quickly now to the second big piece, along with redesigning our streets for slower, safer conditions, for making sure we have space for people walking and biking. The second most important thing we can do is really manage the speed. And it's interesting, I think when we say, gosh, we know how to answer this problem, we know the vaccine for this, it really comes out to managing speed. And I've learned a lot through the Safe Systems approach to think, it really is a matter of physics. And our bodies, our physical bodies, can withstand so much in a crash impact. And the reality is either we design for inevitable crashes to be survivable or we do not. So there's a really big difference about, hey, what are we doing on a freeway or a highway where there's only car traffic and people are obviously protected in a vehicle? That's a very different environment than our cities where people are walking and biking and standing and waiting for the bus and riding scooters and skateboards. If we're mixing those road users, those members of the community with people driving, it is a known fact that our speeds can be a problem. So here's an example of this. It's really interesting to see that at these lower speeds of roughly 30, 35 kilometers an hour, the risk of death is relatively low. Still a risk and still, probably an injury, but it astronomically shoots up at about 35, 40 kilometers per hour. So this is a dramatic difference. In the US, we're really pushing for the theme of 20 is plenty. For us, that's miles per hour, 20 miles per hour. I know there's a worldwide campaign called Love 30, meaning 30 kilometers an hour, meaning in cities, we should be setting our speed limits, designing our streets, and setting our enforcement mechanisms around these speeds, where if someone is hit, they are likely to survive. And I'm really encouraged by London. I'd say that's the place that the big city that is more recently making big changes. Just about a week or two ago, within the last 2 weeks, London moved all of its city center streets down to 20 kilometers an hour, the entire center of the city. So really exciting. I think we'll be thrilled to see what kind of results come out of that. And I should say London is a Vision Zero city, has a really great action plan, seems really serious about the work, and I think is one to watch. And back to New York, which I mentioned, again, early adopter, a big part of their work along with the street redesign, which I mentioned, is lowering speeds limits and adding speed cameras. So New York City was a place where the de facto or the law was 30 miles per hour. They lowered that to 25 miles per hour just a few years ago as part of their Vision Zero effort. They also added cameras, speed cameras, around all schools. And they credit those two changes, those speed changes, along with a really aggressive street redesign program. They've doubled the number of streets they're improving for safety, again, by removing travel lanes, adding bike lanes, widening sidewalks, increasing pedestrian crossing time. All of that has helped them with that 30% reduction of traffic fatalities. And Toronto, I can't cite that Toronto is making huge progress overall. They're at the very early stages, as I understand, of their Vision Zero work. But one thing they have done is they've lowered speeds down to 30 kilometers an hour in certain neighborhoods. It's not a citywide piece, but rather certain areas or districts that signed on. And what they found, this article goes on to explain that since they've lowered the speed limit, they've seen 28% fewer collisions and 67% fewer severe injuries, most importantly. And one thing we find is when you lower speed limits, often, especially in cities, often it's the high-end speeds that get decreased the most. So people may still be going 5 kilometers over. That's probably going to happen. But it's the folks that are going 10 or 15 over that lower. And those obviously are the most dangerous because of the highest speeds. So just a few more. Portland, Oregon is going to 20 miles per hour on all its residential streets. And many more US communities are doing this. I think it's something we'll see. And lastly, I'll bring it down to the last piece around leadership. And I was really fortunate about 3 weeks ago to be in Stockholm, Sweden. Again, Sweden is the birthplace of Vision Zero. They've seen dramatic, I think a 68% decrease in traffic fatalities in the 20 years that they've been working on Vision Zero. They're really a leader in this. And they hosted a global road safety conference hosted by the World Health Organization and the nation of Sweden. I know I met a bunch of Australians there. There were 170 countries represented. And the pieces that we really heard echoed over and over again was around manage speed, design streets, really think about your fleets, those large vehicles. They're most dangerous because of their size and weight, of course. Really think about elevating pedestrian and bicycle safety, seniors, children. It's really about those most vulnerable road users physically. And I saw a lot of excitement and I'd say potential for where we can go in terms of cities. But most of what I've just said is really well known. We've known it for a long time. I think what Vision Zero and the Safe Systems approach can do and is doing is bringing stronger leadership to this issue. And it really is a matter of our electeds, our community leaders, our various department directors stepping up and treating road safety like the priority it deserves to be. So it's about, embracing mobility, of course. We need people to get where they want to go, but ensuring that it's safe mobility first and foremost, and making sure that we are really thinking about how to get folks there safely. And this is too much detail to read. I hesitated, but I wanted to put this up because a city in the US, Denver, Colorado, if you're interested, check out their Vision Zero plan. It's very focused, and I think it's one of the best scenarios or best plans. You can see about 20 pages like this, where it's a very clear action, a very clear strategy within that, and then very clearly the time frames, short term, medium term, and then who the leads are on this. So one of the key things we want to do is, does our leadership really set out actionable work that can be measured, that is transparent to the community, that can really, frankly, that they can be held accountable to? Because if we don't have that, we know things don't change. So this is really about saying, hey, these are not accidents. They're crashes, we can prevent them, and we're really calling on our leaders to do so. And I really want to wind down because I talk so much about numbers and strategies and policies, but to really bring it down to people. In no other issue that I can think of do we have a crisis of deaths and severe injuries affecting so many people, especially young people, where we know the answer, but we're not yet doing it. So it really is about building up that, I'd say, political and community will to do so. And if you think it's impossible, check out the work that's happening in Helsinki and Oslo. It was just reported in the last few months. Both of those cities are at 0 traffic deaths for pedestrian, and at just 1 or 2 auto deaths, but they've gotten nearly to 0 through their Vision Zero work. I will wind down there and share my contact information. Vision Zero Network is really happy to work with anybody who's interested to learn more about this work. And thanks so much.
Yay, come on over. Normally, before a live audience, there would have been a lot of applause, but I'm imagining that we're hearing that over the internet. Thank you, Leah.
Thank you.
So let me start with an obvious question, and meanwhile, if any of you want to submit questions, that we'll get in. But what does this mean for Sydney? I know you've been here a week. You've talked to a bunch of people. So, in your opinion, with fresh eyes coming to Sydney, what should Sydney be doing with this kind of information?
Great question. It's interesting. I've had the chance to walk, bus, take transit, drive. You all have great bones here for a safe system. I mean, so many elements or so much kind of design or base is there. It's really about, okay, now how do you use this scarce and stretched space, which is, the problem every big city and crowded and built out city has, right? Is what do we do with this precious space? I've definitely seen a lot of places where I'm surprised how narrow the sidewalks are, given a really, really high number of people walking, down in your core area and busy commercial streets and near the transit centers I've been in and out of. Thinking about widening sidewalks, certainly adding dedicated bikeways and ideally physically separated bikeways like you saw in those pictures. I know you all have, ambitious environmental goals, public health goals, economic and livability goals. How do we help everybody in the city get to jobs and school and work? Thinking about how do we give people those options to walk and bike is, I think, just a really obvious piece. And I'm sure, obviously, people are thinking about that here. But when I look around, I'll be honest, it doesn't look especially welcoming and inviting
to pedestrians,
to people walking and biking. Yeah, and even to someone who's walking a little bit and then getting on the train, getting on the bus, or going from the car park to the office. I think there's a lot that could be done really about redesignating space. It's interesting. I mean, in my experience back in San Francisco, in the beginning, there was a lot of hem and haw and, oh no, what are we going to do when we had road diets or we redesigned streets from, say, 4 travel lanes down to 2, added bike lanes, widened the sidewalks. People said, oh, the sky is going to fall in. We did it. We're doing it place after place after place to create an entire network, and businesses are thriving there. People are driving fine. Maybe they're shifting to some other streets, but there's no overwhelming problem of spilling over to other streets and traffic. So I think the fear of these changes are often greater than the reality. And hopefully there's enough good evidence from some other cities. I think London's another great one to look at, that we could be doing more of that. And then the other piece is speed. I'll just say there's certainly some room to lower the speed limits. That's not all you need to do. You don't want to lower speeds without doing other things like redesign, but to lower the citywide speed limit to closer to 30 sets the expectation and sends the message that people should be traveling at a safe speed.
Yeah.
And then it's going to help you redesign those streets to a safer speed also.
Yeah. That's probably one move that is actually so simple and easy that would save a lot of lives, is citywide lowering the speed limit, not on the highways that are separated, but on streets that will have pedestrians as well as cars. Lowering the speed limit to no more than 30 kilometers per hour. That's probably very few things in life would have that much of an immediate benefit for saving lives.
And it's interesting, I think, for us in the US, it's a pretty diffuse system, I'll be honest. It's not something I love. Each of our 50 states has control over these things, so it's pretty complicated. But what we're seeing is a lot more impetus from the local level. It's really growing. Just in the last week, the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, a few others, smaller communities. So it's not just your big, New York cities and such. Places like Charlotte, North Carolina in the U.S. These places are literally going to their legislatures and saying, hey, we want to do this, and we'll test it out, we'll show you the data, but they're really fighting hard, even when it takes some legal changes, to do it. And they're measuring it, and they're seeing fewer injuries and fewer severe crashes.
Yeah. The other part of what you observed being here, where the footpaths, that's what they call a sidewalk in Australia, is a footpath,
Thank you.
are just too narrow. There are so many streets that are like the Queens Boulevard before picture you showed in New York, where there simply are too many lanes of traffic. And what needs to happen is a road diet where the number of moving lanes is reduced, the footpath is widened quite significantly. That probably takes a little longer than changing speed limits, which could happen overnight. But of course, that's what we have to do to make it not just safe, but a place that is inviting, where people really enjoy being out and enjoy city life.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I think the whole kind of tactile urbanism and DIY urbanism, like the idea of more pilots in physical space happening in cities is a really good thing to combine with the safety piece, to think, okay, let's do what we can quickly, which would be things like lowering speed limits. Let's redesign our streets, but that's going to take time and money. Let's do it, but let's get it going. But in the meantime, are there things we can do just with paint and with moving, big giant planters out? And we probably know the examples of New York City and the amazing work that's happened there with people like Jeanette Sadiq Khan, years ago, and still happening. They've completely reimagined and reconfigured the busiest streets in our country. And people love it. They took away travel lanes, they added all this public space and public seating, and you go there now and people are hanging out where there used to just be car traffic. And the cars didn't disappear, they're moving around, but it works.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue to a question we have from Josh Bridges. New York really famously made so much change via pilot projects, which was essentially an end run around their process, which just took so long for them to make a change to the streets. So they said, fine, we'll just test it out, it's reversible. And then I think that's a lesson that has spread all over the world. But that actually links to COVID-19 in this question. Some people have proposed that governments should reduce speed limits temporarily in order to reduce crash victims ending up in the hospital, to free space to treat people who are suffering from the virus. Does that make sense?
Wow, yes. I mean, to be honest, I had not thought about that in this context, but that makes absolute sense. I mean, I know in my city's trauma unit, half the injuries they deal with, half the problems they deal with are traffic related. I don't know how it is in other hospitals, but we know it's too high of a number. That's an amazing idea to free up the space, to help people get where they're going still, but frankly, calmly and more safely. And thinking about ambulances, space in the hospital rooms, absolutely. It's really the interesting thing. I wonder if that's something, that we cities could be doing together across the globe. It's unfortunately a way we're all interconnected right now.
Yeah. In Sydney, the decisions about this are not made by local government mostly. They're made by state government because they've decided that the roads are, I'll put in quotation marks, state roads. But that's the Australian system, is that the states have the power. So an interesting question from Russell King. In the state of New South Wales, 2/3 of the fatalities are on country roads, even though it's only 1/3 of the population. Does Vision Zero translate to less high density, less urban settings? What does it look like there?
Great question, and I should have mentioned this. It's interesting, the foundation of Vision Zero and the safe systems approach is actually on rural roads. I learned 20 years ago, this started in Sweden. At that time, their biggest problems, their highest number of fatalities, were on 2-lane country roads. And those were sadly head-on car crashes where they didn't have a median divider. So cars were crashing into each other at high speeds. So they really emphasized most of their work in the first 10 years of Vision Zero in Sweden on the rural areas. And what they did, and it was expensive and time consuming, but they did it. In those 10 years, they went out and built medians in between. They said, okay, the data shows this is the problem. They built the medians and traffic fatalities went severely down. So they really tackled that. Then they looked, okay, what are the next levels? So they started working more in cities after that. I think for some of us, I know in the US, our data shows that it is much higher pedestrian and bicycling. Not particularly, well, the numbers, but certainly the rate. So we've got a real significant issue with the rate, it being much more dangerous. So, thinking about what your problems are, but I'd say, the principles stay the same. It's still about, that kinetic energy when two things hit each other or more when things hit each other, right? So if it's cars hitting each other, what do you do about that? How do you calm that down? If it's a pedestrian and someone driving. So it really is about that. I think a lot of us are focused on cities, again, because we're seeing a little bit more of the political momentum come from there. But there's great examples. I think the UK is doing some good things, again, lowering speed limits on country roads, setting up some different kinds of, intersection control improvements, even things like rumble strips that have been around forever on country roads where you don't have people walking or biking, likely those are things that can really make a difference.
I'll add that my observation about regional Australia is that the towns are these little moments of actual urbanism. So it's smaller scale, but that's where actually things come together and get concentrated. And a lot of country New South Wales towns would benefit from the same design treatments that Sydney would benefit from. So I think there's a lot of overlap in the solutions.
Yeah, I feel like it's really scalable. I mean, it's a matter of, okay, does this look like this for Sydney, but something a little smaller version elsewhere?
All right, an interesting question about autonomous vehicles, and this comes up a lot. This one's from Emma Thomas, but if part of the principle of Vision Zero is it's designing with the expectation there will be human error, as the vehicle fleet eventually changes over to autonomous vehicles where you don't have human error, you don't have people checking their cell phones, you don't have vehicles going over the speed limit, or being distracted. Does that then eventually obviate the need for the kinds of things you've been talking about, or does it change it in some way?
Yeah, great question. My mind goes right to, if it were a scenario where everyone were in vehicles all the time, maybe so, right? But we don't want to lose our communities and our cities, right? We still are going to have people walking and biking and skateboarding and pogo sticking around, on the sidewalk, right? We want people to get around in human-scaled ways. So we're always going to have these interactions, whether they're today's vehicles or the cars of the future that maybe we can't even imagine. There's always going to be that interaction. So, to the point of, I hope, and I think the technology world is telling us, it will be safer when you take out some of these human decision-making processes. It's not going to be everything. I think we even have seen, sadly, in some of the testing around the AVs, even machines go haywire sometimes, and there will be problems with that as well. So I think it's a matter of, it'll be a different management of issues, but there'll still be mistakes made. I'd say more maybe fundamentally though is, what is the environment we're putting these newfangled vehicles into, right? Are the speed limits set at a safe speed or a dangerous speed? Because again, people are going to sometimes bump into things. It's going to happen. So why not be managing that now at the right pace? And again, if autonomous vehicles are going to be such a great safety improvement and help take some stress out of our lives, wonderful. But hopefully that means we're actually able to come and add more space for walking and biking and parks and housing and other good things we need. Otherwise, we're just shifting from, say, gas guzzlers to electric AVs, and we've still got the same other concerns that too many cars in our cities are causing.
Yeah, part of I think the fear that most urbanists have about autonomous vehicles is that they could, in the same way that after World War II, we designed suburbia in the image of the automobile to sort of make it easy to drive. You could imagine redesigning cities in the image of autonomous vehicles, which essentially means getting rid of the really unpredictable part, which is humans. So creating spaces where you don't have people on foot doing stupid things, you don't have people on skateboard, you don't have people on bike, and that would be terrible. That would be the death of city life. You'd create a sort of sanitized space where autonomous vehicles could move through intersections without hitting each other, but not a place for people.
Right. Talk about distancing, right? I mean, this is not the kind of distancing we want for the future.
A question from a transport official with the city of Sydney, the LGA. And basically asking the question, how do we change the mindset of transport officials who still think their job is to try to maximize throughput of car traffic, who still have a hard time seeing the purpose of streets as enabling movement of people on foot, movement of people on bicycle, and enabling public life. Because of course, we've made it sound so obvious, and it is to us, that all of this should happen, but there are people who don't agree, or else it would have happened already.
Right.
So how do you change the mindset of people who are really wedded to that older traffic engineering approach that says, try to maximize throughput of cars?
Yeah, I think that is the key question, right? And we're asking that question a lot. It's interesting. I do feel encouraged that we're seeing that more and more, and I think some of the ways it's happening are, frankly, bringing more urgency and talking about these numbers. To talk about, for us in the U.S., it's 100 traffic deaths a day, preventable traffic deaths a day. So as much as you can start to, I think, humanize that, and I'll just share, and you pull a tug on the heartstrings somewhat, but bringing people in who've lost loved ones or who've been physically hurt themselves by a traffic crash, bringing them in to meet with your transport director, with a city council leader, with another elected, to talk about what this has meant for their lives and really say, okay, this is X people a day in our city, and you're not hearing from all of them, but this is what it feels like. So I think there's a lot we can do first in general around Vision Zero and safety. Help humanize this. This is not just an engineering problem, and it's not just going to be an engineering solution. I think really bring it back to public health and human kind of ethical rights and responsibilities issues. So that's kind of the big picture of it. And then secondly, I'd say there are mounds of data and research out there showing the positive impacts or showing the benefits of lower speed limits. And it's really interesting that we haven't grasped onto that. I think for a lot of people I'm learning, engineers understandably, are very specific and precise, and they want to go by the books, which they should, and that's the rules. They want to do things how things are done. I think, we're seeing more and more leadership within the engineering field, I think, shift to this understanding of, the traditional speed setting and speed management approach to what we're calling the safe systems speed management approach. And again, we've seen it work in Sweden, the Netherlands, the UK. We're starting to play with it in the US. It is really factually proven when we do these things, so traffic calming and certain type of street designs, when we lower speed limits, when we add safety cameras, speed cameras, people drive slower, right? It's this crazy thing where, if we think education is going to be the only thing and our finger wagging about going slow and being safe, that's not going to work, right? We've tried that. It's not going to work. It really is about a carrot-sticks approach to making this work. So I know what we've done is really do a lot of peer exchange. So when a city's done it well, when a city like San Francisco or Washington, D.C. in the U.S. has lowered speed limits, and London, actually, we worked a lot with London when they lowered their speed limits before in certain areas, we connected them to city leaders and engineers. Again, I'd say it's really about the practitioners on the ground. They've really been able to learn from each other and ask those tough questions. And then another piece is, how to work with some of those engineering groups like your national, trade group or so on engineering, even the engineering schools, planning and engineering schools. How are we getting the safe systems approach in so that that next generation of professionals coming into the field, that's longer term. Another piece is really doing a lot of before and after analysis. If a community is going to make a change, even if it's just a neighborhood like Toronto, really study your before and after well, and study not just are people moving slower, safer and slower, but also are people getting where they need to go in a reasonable amount of time? Because I think what we've seen is people are surprised to hear, oh wow, we lowered the speed limit by 5 or 10 kilometers an hour, and the average car trip took another 10 seconds. When people hear that, but then they see the safety benefits versus this very minimal travel time impact, and then you also bring in those individuals who've been impacted, really kind of teaming it up with data and experience and personal stories can make a big difference.
Okay, last question, I think, because we're going to try to end on time. Ed Steen, safe streets seem to be nice streets too. Is safety or placemaking a better or another advocacy angle to get at safety?
Absolutely, yes, totally. And I think it's really been interesting to see different groups come together, say it's a business council, say it's a senior rights group, youth groups like schools, pedestrian and bike advocacy. They're all coming together in more of our communities around the Vision Zero safety piece. And they might be coming with their own angle, right? Is it an economic angle? Is it pedestrian safety? Is it youth safety? Is it from more of an environmental or health angle? Absolutely. But this idea of let's set this shared goal. And I'm really excited in our city of San Francisco, our main corridor, Market Street, which is kind of the spine of the city, after years of work, but is going car-free, has gone car-free. Now it's transit, walking, biking, scooters, and they're seeing dramatic improvements or increases in number of people biking and in transit timing, and the business community supported it because they knew more people getting here is a good thing. So people are still going to drive, but they'll park a block or two away and they'll walk over, and it's really working well. So, I think there's a balance between, hey, safety, 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 but you also don't want to scare people too much, right? Yes, there's a safety message, but it's also about making the city safe so that people can enjoy it and can go out and do the things they want to do.
Okay, there are a whole bunch of questions I see. So first of all, that means that this format of doing these events online is working. Thank you to everybody who has tuned in. I am sorry for those of you who were not getting a chance to get to your questions, but please feel free to follow up with me or with Leah, and we can at least continue this over email. Normally, this is where we would adjourn to go have drinks and everybody would chat. So that part we cannot do with you remotely. I want to say that the Committee for Sydney is quite committed to pursuing some of these ideas. We really think this is a big opportunity to make city life better. So, Leah, thank you for coming to Sydney.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing some of what you've learned.
Great.
All right, see the rest of you soon.